2020 already, and it's nearly done. Deloitte is never going to survive, and our partnerships are irrelevant. We will never be inventive, exploring, and discovering. We only wanted to stay where we have always been. There was never a need to stay hungry for new things. We've been forever stuck in what we already know. We never wished to be more than that. Because who needs confidence, expertise, and a huge network to partner with when you have one great skill to completely rely on? Because we think it's scary to stumble around in the dark, so we haven't been afraid to stand still and never dared to start looking forward. We always attempted the easy solution, not interested in the better solution. We tried, and thus what we really did was following our own cold tracks instead of looking for untrodden snow. We're going to miss the boat, and we have no reason to believe the future of Deloitte is a bright one, unless we see that it's never too late to start looking forward. The future of Deloitte is a bright one, and we have no reason to believe we're going to miss the boat. Looking for untrodden snow instead of following our own cold tracks was what we really did. And thus, we tried the better solution, not interested in the easy solution. We always attempted to start looking forward and never dared to stand still. So we haven't been afraid to stumble around in the dark, because we think it's scary to completely rely on one great skill when you have confidence, expertise, and a huge network to partner with. Because who needs more than that? We never wished to be stuck in what we already know. We've been forever hungry for new things. There was never a need to stay where we have always been. We only wanted to stay inventive, exploring, and discovering. We will never be irrelevant, and our partnerships are going to survive. Deloitte is never done, and it's nearly 2020 already.
Welcome. I had to watch this video twice. I was really not believing that it was actually just playing the other way, and that if I looked at it differently, the message completely flipped. What I want to talk about is how looking at IoT differently will give you different results. The tagline, welcome by the way, I just wanted to say thanks for coming. It's really weird when you give a speech somewhere, when you talk, and at the same token you get on your mobile phone, please walk to Moscone Center to see the CEO of Microsoft speak. So thank you for coming to see me speak. Somehow I believe you really are here to see and hear what we talk about here, so thank you for that. I thought that was pretty funny. Yeah. We talk about things, and what I want to talk about is how to think about things first. And I want to go a little bit and talk about this hyperreality. I'm sure many of you have seen this. This is sort of the hype curve. It goes up, and then there's this trough of delusion. I don't know where we are with IoT on this. I think it also depends on what you have done with this. I'd like to think we're kind of like on that up peak there. Everybody's talking about it. What I want to think, what I want to say when I see this curve is that we have a chance to change how deep the trough is and how long the trough is. But what I want to really do is I want to give you some perspective on scale. Because IoT, you know, you're gonna see different numbers everywhere you go. I really don't care so much if it's 100 billion things or, you know, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that there's going to be a magnitude shift from this. We already talked about places, and then we started talking about mobile phones. If you think you got this covered, think a magnitude or two higher. This is what we're going to get with IoT. What's going to get connected? Some of the things, everything, it doesn't really matter. The scale is a whole new ball game. And this is why platforms are going to be important. This is why I'm here with Salesforce, because I believe it's a good idea to work with someone who works in this area. There's a lot of people today who are trying to stitch this together themselves. And I always want to remind people of this. The scale of IoT is a whole new ball game. It's huge. There's going to be sensors in so many things you can't even believe. What's interesting to me about this is that when you think of sensors, what always strikes me is that, hi Aaron, I can almost we should have all introductions here. Everybody introduced themselves. We could have gone around. What strikes me about sensors is, what's so different is today, I'm going to talk about the Ganges River a little bit later, but what strikes me is today what happens is we simulate. We think that we know, we measure something here and then we simulate and extrapolate what's going on out there. That's not going to be what we're going to do tomorrow. Tomorrow we actually going to know where you are exactly. We're going to know what the temperature is where you are. We're going to know what goes on in so many different areas. It's amazing. I work with a manufacturing environment and they galvanize stuff. And what happens is they now can measure when they put the material they galvanize into these big baths of stuff, I don't even know the technical term for it, what the weight changes is. And now they can measure things they couldn't measure before. And this is going to be our life. There's going to be sensors in so many areas. So this is why the scale is going to be so different. And for us who are going to work with IoT, we always got to remember scale. Here is another version of this, more in a business view in terms of revenue additions. What really strikes me here is sort of the gigabyte of data that we're going to start collecting around this. I was the CIO of Activision, and what was so interesting to me is what do you do with that data? When you today play a game, any online game, it gets tracked what outfit you're wearing in the game, what material in the Call of Duty example, what guns you're wearing, what color the gun was, where you were when you were shot the 5th time in the back by your friend. There is so much data that's collected. It's amazing. The question is, what do we do with that data? And last but not least, very interesting with you here from Sydney, the growth is going to be bigger outside the US than it's going to be inside the US. Here's another data point why the growth is so big. It's driven and what happens. So many vendors are going in this space, and we've seen this week with Salesforce with their announcement around their IoT cloud, but we've seen it from many other vendors. You see it on the product side with wearables on your watches, Google, Apple. You walk through the airport talking about Microsoft, you see how they get 10 billion transactions a day for weather data. It's just lots and lots of companies going there, and then we could go all the way to the left. And obviously it's us, Deloitte, and our competitors in that space too. So, what's our approach to IoT? It's growing, it's big. What do we do around it? First, I want to talk about something we call the value loop. Please go out there, dupress.com. Check it out. We talk about this a lot. Where in the loop around the value can you generate value? Is it the sensor? Is it in the network? Is it on standards, augmented intelligence, augmented behavior? I've talked about this a little bit in terms of the masses of data. It's going to be, we talk about big data today. This is going to be huge data. But really, what's the intelligence? What are we going to do with that? Augmented reality, augmented intelligence, Watson, those kind of things gonna really gonna be interesting in this space, and we're gonna get a lot out of that. And then there's the applications, obviously, on the side that are gonna be interacting with that. And then when you take that a layer further down, I talked about this, the platform. What I want to talk here about is You can see all along the value loop here, the create, the communicate, the aggregate, the analyze, the act. There is so many different levels involved of technology that you need to work with. You know, you got to talk about the physical device. What's the sensor? It's amazing to me today to watch. Every day there's a new sensor out there. I've just heard recently there's this clip that you can put on your nose that measures your breathing. So when you go and you leave the hospital, how do they track your breathing? When you're in the hospital, when you're at the ICU, there's a lot of that happens with breathing. How can you track this? A new sensor for that. So sensors are exploding. I've looked at some of the investment numbers. They keep doubling every year lately. Connectivity, big deal. What do? How do you connect these things? Interesting stuff going on around this, right? Data over the cellular network is still expensive. You want to send all this data back? Maybe not. We're working a lot with a company, or particularly one company, that actually does a lot more of the computing out at the edge now, because you don't want to send everything back. You just want to send back what's important to send back, and you want to be able to respond right away out on the edge. When you come to the network, what happens is around connectivity, it's been interesting. Some people find out with all of us going 3G, LTE, 4G, you know, the 2G network actually is underutilized. So some of the vendors now go buy up 2G so you can use your sensors connecting to 2G. Latency is, in some of those cases, not such a big deal. So another very interesting example here. Management. How do you manage all these sensors? How do you update them? Obviously, there's the whole accumulation of the data. What do you do with them, get them? And then you get data from sensors, but you got to aggregate them, and you not only got to aggregate them, but you got to enhance them with other data that's out there, weather data, location data, so forth. The processing around that. There's a really new thing around not only do you have the data, and you need to process it in real time now, so stream processing is really coming up big. And so how do you react to some of the stuff in real time? What do you react in real time? And then obviously the whole application side. Shouldn't forget about security. Not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. And obviously standards is really in the early phases around this. We at Deloitte, we work with the industry groups together, but standards is really in its infancy around that. Last, our view on this is start now and do it quick. Iterate quickly. Don't go and there's like, I spent some time in Europe. I'm originally Austrian, so I can make fun of my countrymen, but there was this whole conversation. We'd like to spend 6 months to analyze a platform. Not build it, analyze it. Your competitors are going to pass you by. So our approach to this is very fast sprints. We come in, we do lots of pilots with you. Try these things out. And here's the slide that excites me the most. If you read up what McKinsey says, there's lots of talk about the enterprise on the top left. Does this have a pointer, actually? I don't know. No, doesn't matter. Lots of revenue opportunities, lots of opportunities around efficiency improvements. What do you do on your manufacturing floor? How do you improve what goes on in your company? You can read the numbers. I don't want to read them to you. Interesting stuff that we really do today. We've seen a lot of stuff around, a lot of projects around this. It's exciting. There's real incremental gains. We step it up one level. The consumer side, the numbers get big. You're going to have some very interesting new business model emerging because suddenly you know something the consumer does rather than you think you know. And so just by the fact that you know something, new models will emerge. We've seen this around parking meters where the parking meter talks back and gives you consumers information about the parking situation in San Francisco and in other cities, and now people decide to take BART or drive based on that information. So now you get really interesting new consumer examples. So what happens is from incremental value gains on the enterprise side, you're really flipping it over now to really significant magnitude gains on the consumer side and shifts transformations in business models. Human impact is when I really find my passion. Safer roads. 1 million lives saved per year due to fewer accidents. Feed everyone. 70% increase in food production by 2050. Save water. 50 billion gallons of water saved annually. A cleaner planet with CO2 reduction by 2030. These are really interesting numbers. And where does this come from? Google cars, self-driving cars. Those cars, they're not going to have accidents because the technology fails. They're going to have accidents because someone drives in them. You talk about feed everyone. I was on a call with a company that makes agricultural equipment. Now they're starting to measure where did the equipment exactly drive and how much water did it put on. Was it efficient? Where can you get more out of your existing land and really define some of this stuff? Save the water. This isn't really save the water, but we've been in conversations around the Ganges River where the Indian government is putting sensors into the river to actually measure what goes on in the river and affect millions of people with better water quality. Imagine what impact that can make. This is what I find fascinating. This is when we get out of incremental change to transformational change when actually having a human impact. So with that, I want to, before we get into questions, leave you with one question of my own. What impact will you make with IoT? What impact will you make with IoT? Thank you. There's a great crowd. I figured maybe have more time for questions rather than me talking. There's a mic we can walk around. Might be done soon.
While they think about the question,
go ahead. The
my
digital X question
was, what's
yes.
Mr. Digital X?
So, we in Deloitte, we work on a variety of different projects, and we're always really busy. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to give people an opportunity to work on innovative new technologies. And about a year ago, when we said we need to do some more with IoT, we wanted to give people an opportunity to work on IoT. So we have internal crowdsourcing going on. We have 60, 70 people that help out in a variety of IoT areas they do. We've had different projects going on in India. We've had projects going on in the US where people work in their spare time. And so we call it Digital X, X for Crossroads, X for it's sort of like a bit of a play of Google X, new ideas and so forth. So
you talked about...
and I lead that group. That's
fabulous.
That's why Mr. Digital X.
Because a couple of, even though we have talked before, you talk about...
I'm going to come down. This is really odd to be up here.
You talk about cities. Is that some of the pet projects that were there? I.e., some of the things that you're going to India?
No, so those weren't pet projects. We had a very interesting project with the city of Barcelona where we met... We did a project with the city of Barcelona where we looked at their electronic initiatives. Actually, interestingly enough, this week in Barcelona is the World Conference of IoT going on. So this is you and I.
That's right.
Are we okay? I don't want to send them all home by deaf. Okay, here we go. We need some sensors here. And so we do a variety of different projects with, we did one with the city of Barcelona looking at GDP improvements because of Internet of Things and Wi-Fi and so forth. As I said, we're working with the government in India on a variety of different proposals around the Ganges River and putting sensors in the... Thank you. And so can I come back down or do I have to stay in the cage? Okay, I'll stay up here. They caged me, Aaron. Are you going to ever make that happen? So yes, we work with a variety of different cities around that. Okay, let's just hand it down the road. Someone's going to have a question. In the back, the gentleman, I think he's itching. You looked like you had a question. I can hear you. I'll repeat.
Is that a thing that you're addressing and thinking about? These things that are.
It's very different from case to. So the question was, what are these things powered by? And I'm assuming you mean things. You mean the sensors, right? So it's different in each case, right? Sometimes the sensor in the car, that's fine as a battery. You just hook it up to the battery or the alternator or whatever runs. Sometimes you need to actually put a battery there. So for example, there's some passive beacons that have little batteries in there, and you gotta just plan for changing them. There's a variety of different solutions to this, but yes, you have to think about it. And interestingly enough, I have to say, the whole sensor business and those kind of things, that's really where we are starting to invest heavily in. Not so much the building of it. That is really with the sensor companies, but to know what sensors are out there, to think through those kind of problems. You know, power is one thing, but then think about updating them. You got to get them updated. You have all these sensors, now you got to manage them. You know, we've had problems managing phones in enterprises. Imagine managing sensors now. You can't go out there and fix them all the time. You need to fix them. You need to think of when they break. And then the other thing with these sensors is you got to think of them in terms of you put them into these harsh environments. I talked about the manufacturing environment in a galvanizing plant. There's acid and stuff that's really not healthy everywhere, right? So now you take these sensors and these beacons, and some of them you dunk in there, so you need to have some very heavy industrial use sensors for that. So power is one of them. Often there is power at most of those places, and sometimes the power consumption is really, really low, depending on what we measure. I knew you had a question.
Information that you shared, all of this is really truly amazing, the future of the Internet of Things. I'm really interested to find out about Deloitte using Salesforce in connection to the Internet of Things, because all of this is really great. How does Deloitte, is there a specific example you can share?
So there were sessions with Lineage Logistics, a logistics provider in the food industry, that were yesterday going on that talked about this, where we are doing a project with them where they have sensors in their warehouses. Some of them are temperature sensors. Some of them are just footprint sensors. They talk about how they have these warehouses the size of football fields, and any space that's not used is wasted space. So they measure what they put where, they measure temperature. The whole idea, imagine, so there's this fact that I didn't know, you might, but every apple that we get today on average travels 1,500 miles. Yeah, every piece of food travels about 1,500 miles until it gets from where it's made to you. I mean, just that thought is mind-boggling to me.
Temperature controlled.
So temperature control. Imagine you could really know, not just, think of the company that actually ships it, you let them know, right? So Chiquita goes and ships a bunch of bananas. They'd like to know what the temperature is through that 1,500 miles, but tell you, that piece of meat that went from here to there, this was consistently temperature controlled, so therefore, it's better for you and so forth and kind of stuff. So this is one project we do. It actually uses Salesforce, it uses MuleSoft, and it uses Cloudera, so it's a combination of a variety of different things. We do a variety of different projects that...
Have you specifically chosen Salesforce over another database in certain instances for some specific advantage? In this case, I don't know if the temperature-controlled application, is that something that better integrates with Salesforce than it does into another system, and therefore you choose one over the other?
So I have to say, to call Salesforce a database, someone might actually have a bit of a heart
attack.
attack.
I wasn't the one. I'm not letting you say it.
I know what you mean. Look, I'm going to answer this slightly differently. I don't think you're going to get the answer out of me to tell you that I don't know, I think I know what you'd like to hear. We use Salesforce as one of our solutions, right? And the reason Salesforce is one of our key partners in this area. It's not the only partner we work with. My answer to you is that it's really important to find a partner that fits into your ecosystem. And Salesforce fits really well in many aspects. So for the lineage logistics example, they use Heroku. They really use Heroku for the power with mobile. They use Salesforce for customer service and tracking. Actually, the key data goes back into the core of Salesforce. And then they use other things for other stuff. So they haven't chosen to use all Salesforce. Let me answer it this way. I do believe that you need to pick a vendor like Salesforce to work with you, because if you're going to start building this up from scratch, you have a long, rocky road ahead of you. And more importantly, the thing that's so interesting about the pilots we do is they start small. You're not going to have 100 billion devices running on day one. And it's going to work with what you do today. You're going to have your regular middleware is going to work, your regular database is going to work, and all this stuff is going to work fine. You're going to step it up one step, and then you're going to run into a wall and you're going to have to re-architect. So that's why my recommendation is go with a platform like Salesforce, because it's going to really get you away from that. And for me, that's, as an ex-CIO, that's the thing. I'd like to have a partner that I can rely on to help me grow.
And if I would add a line to that, and if you have not seen the IoT cloud presentation kickoff, or you haven't been to the campground and seen the IoT cloud at work, I think I would suggest you go there, because one of the things about the IoT cloud, what Ross talked about was all the sensor stocking. So it's not just the sensors, it's every tweet, every SMS, every mobile device. It's that data that's ingesting, and that's some of the things that I was going to ask you. The question was, Ross talked about three things: aggregating, then there was acting, and there was aggregating. Basically, you're ingesting the data, you're aggregating, analyzing, and acting. So if you look at IoT Cloud, it does the same thing. It's aggregating, ingesting every data, every feed from every sensor, SMSs, mobile, and then, of course, it's analyzing it to say, what trends am I getting out of it, and putting some basic rules behind, and then, of course, then triggering action. Now, did you have something to say on those three blocks? You've seen the IoT Cloud as well.
We've worked with Adam Bosworth a couple of months ago, and I've seen the architecture, and it's a really promising architecture that you guys have put together around the IoT Cloud. And it's going to help us, and it's going to help our customers to really scale up into, so the numbers I've heard is 5 billion transactions a day. That's the measuring stick towards the IoT Cloud. And that's a big freaking number.
Well, we had Emerson on stage that day as well, that was yesterday, and they're going to be pushing almost 20 billion transactions. So that's a huge amount of transaction you push. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I should put a safe harbor there. But anyway, questions? Well, thank you very much. Thanks a lot,
Thank you
Ross.
so much. I appreciate it. Very nice meeting you. Thank you.
Thank you.